Right, let's begin the meeting of February 2nd, 2026 for Legislative Program Committee. Welcome, everyone. Kathy, do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda?
I don't see any.
Then we'll move to administrative items. It's from the December 8th, 2025 meeting. Approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So approved. All right, and then we'll move on to our federal update. Don Gilchrist, thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So as of Saturday morning, the federal government is partially shut down again. We don't think this is going to be a very long shutdown, but we just don't know at this point. We have to wait until see if the House can pass the legislation that is needed on Tuesday to reopen. And the vote margins can be very tight in the House, so we don't really know for sure, but right now I think it will happen on Tuesday. But just trying to track all of this could give you whiplash, very much on again, off again. January, we saw a lot of things come together to help the appropriations process take off. The status is that 6 of the 12 funding bills have been signed into law. The remaining 6 have been passed by the House and need to be passed by the Senate so the president can sign them. So that was a lot of progress. The package that is waiting consideration in the Senate has things in it that are very important to the county, including bills like the Transportation Housing Funding Bill and the Labor, Health, and Human Services Funding Bill. But there's a lot more in that package of 6 bills. The immigration enforcement in Minneapolis that resulted in 2 deaths really derailed that process as congressional Democrats decided to protest by withholding their support for moving forward, primarily because of the Homeland Security bill that's part of the package. Since then, the Senate was able to pass a revised package that stripped out the Homeland bill. And since that changed the legislation, it has to go back to the House for final approval. Overall, I think the spending package aligns well with the county's priorities. There's a sense that getting full year funding bills signed into law provides some sort of certainty, or at least a little bit of certainty, for how these programs will be implemented. It certainly doesn't stop the White House from doing their aggressive actions, such as issuing executive orders, but it's probably much better than relying on a full year continuing resolution, which would give the White House a lot more discretion. And as far as the funding levels go, I think it's a win for the county. It rejects the deep cuts that President Trump proposed in his budget proposal. The cuts that the House Republicans were including in their bills as they drafted them and tried to get them through the House are pretty much rejected. In general, non-defense spending for programs is at or near the levels of the previous year. So this is not fantastic news until you consider the alternative, which was the deep cuts that were proposed. And this feels like a win in some ways. Just some examples. The House drafted a bill that would have eliminated funding for some housing programs, such as the Home Investment Partnership Act. And under the compromise agreement, that program is sustained at its current funding level of $1.25 billion, and that cut is rejected. A similar dynamic is in the health funding part of the package. The CDC was proposed for a 19% cut in the House legislation. That's rejected, and the CDC gets the same amount of funding as last year, which is $9.1 billion. So in most of the categories of the accounts and programs, that kind of scenario played out. And so it's being seen as a rejection of the Trump budget and the Republican budget cuts. Uh, the Homeland Security bill is stripped out and will come up separately. It's under a 2-week continuing resolution of its own. So that's going to provide us additional opportunities to fund, to lobby some of those programs. Some of the reforms will align with what the county is trying to do in the areas of masking. So the Democrats will be proposing that. We'll want to weigh in on that over the next week or two. And there's other things in that bill that we're working on, including funding for FEMA and some emergency preparedness programs. And so, assuming we can get all this worked out, we're going to have to turn pretty quickly to the next fiscal year. Once we get fiscal year 26 wrapped up, we have to start on 27 almost immediately. The president is supposed to provide his budget to Congress this week under the budget law. And that's not going to happen. There's just been too many delays in the process that kind of spill over and accumulate. So it could be another month or more before we see his proposals, but we'll be starting almost immediately to work with your local delegation to weigh in with the appropriations committees to try to get ahead of that curve to see if we can prevent some of the same things from happening this year that happened last year. It's quite likely that in an election year, those partisan issues will resurface, but we won't know for sure until we see what the president proposes. Apart from that, a couple things I wanted to mention were two legislative packages that will be coming out very soon, I think, at the committee level. And the first is a Water Resources Development Act. This is the legislation that authorizes Army Corps of Engineers projects and addresses their policies and programs, how their programs will run. And the other one is the Surface Transportation Program Reauthorization, which is a multi-year bill that we need to replace the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I think these will be getting a lot of progress at the committee level over the next couple of months. It's unlikely that they will be signed into law before the end of the year, simply because of the way Congress does things and the complexity of some of these issues that they're dealing with. But we really are wanting to work on these a lot and be careful about what Congress is doing right now, because the decisions they make at the committee level, even if the bills don't make it into law, are likely to carry over into next year as they continue to work on them. So we want to make sure that we're working with your delegation, especially Representative Carbajal serves on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, which has jurisdiction over both of these packages. And both of California's senators serve on the Environment and Public Works Committee. And that committee has a lot to say about both of these packages as well. So we've already started last year to talk with them and to work with county staff to get our proposal, and we'll just continue to do that moving forward. So there's opportunities for Congress to do things on a bipartisan basis, and I think Congress will try to do that, but it will be a difficult year. I'm expecting there to be a lame duck session to try to finish up the appropriations bills, which are almost certainly not going to be done before October 1. And so that just is going to be that kind of a year, I think. So I'll pause there and see if I can respond to any of your questions.
Yeah,
Thank you. Your report, I mean, it seems not as bad as we thought it could be. And yet we're still hurting in our departments, county health and social services. I'll just make that statement.
Yeah, and I think there is a big juxtaposition between executive branch actions and what Congress is willing and able to do. We saw this play out a little bit at the end of last year, and it's carrying over into this year, where simultaneously with the good news in the appropriations bills, we see the White House trying to cut off funding to the state of California. So it's going to be those types of things will continue. I fear we're hearing about additional funding initiatives related to sanctuary jurisdictions that, I'm not sure how they would be implemented. And it's going to be a lot of tough litigation to confront some of these things that are coming out of the White House. But yeah, you are correct. There's a lot of good news, or reasonably good news, I would say, coming out of Congress, but we have a lot of other challenges because of the way that the White House is issuing their orders and rules.
Thank you.
Do you have any predictions for the DHS funding? I know it's,
Yeah, they've given themselves 2 weeks to finish up that bill, and the tensions are so high
yeah,
that I don't know if they'll be able to do it. I'm kind of pessimistic, I guess I should say, that they'll be able to figure this one out in the next 2 weeks. The interesting thing was how the White House seems to have figured out that they overplayed their hand. They want a way out, it seems like. But at the same time, their base is very riled up on the issue. So I'm not sure how far they'd be willing to go, and whether they'd be willing to go far enough that the Democrats would agree that it's enough. And I don't see how that can happen in the next 2 weeks. So what that means for that appropriations bills, would they do another continuing resolution? That's what Congress likes to do when they get into that situation. Would there be a complete funding lapse for the agencies in that bill? Not likely for very long, but it's volatile, and we have to kind of get through Tuesday before we can start seeing how those other issues are going to play out.
and I imagine our two senators are strongly for a great reduction to DHS funding. So there's nothing for us to do to talk about the negative impacts of ICE escalation, et cetera.
They're very much attuned to the situation.
Absolutely.
What's
I would imagine
interesting?
Senator Padilla in particular.
Yeah, yeah. The interesting thing is that the reforms that are being proposed include things in the area of prohibitions on agents wearing masks, which is something that the county of Santa Barbara cares deeply about. So we will want to make your position known on these things, even though we have a good audience with our senators, and we'll reach out to the Appropriations Committee and possibly even the leadership.
Great.
Which department is the Lompoc Animal Shelter money in? Which budget?
That's part of the Housing and Urban Development Department, which is in the Transportation HUD bill. So that's one of the 6 bills that's in this package.
Plating, yeah.
It is not a controversial bill. It's not drawing any attention, at least at this point. So it's really a question of whether that package of 5 bills now can pass the House on Tuesday in the same form that the Senate did it. If they change 1 comma, then we'll have to go back to the Senate. And the Speaker has not got much of a margin for his votes counts. I think they're down to 1 now. So Thomas Massie from Kentucky seems to vote no on everything. So I don't know. They don't have any margin at all. If anybody else has an issue, this could fail. Now, the president is pushing hard for, and that has been significant in the past for helping the Republicans to get things done. So
She never asked her.
And the 1.4 million for the Cross Valley Connector in Santa Ynez, that's in last year's budget, isn't it? So we're still just waiting to have it
that is
signed.
true. That is correct. It's enacted money. It's not, it doesn't have anything to do with the legislation that we're currently working on. And there, my latest information on that is that SB CAG has been helping the tribe get together the draft grant
Yeah.
agreement,
Oh.
the proposed grant agreement, and that's very close to getting the tribe's stamp of approval. They may have already submitted it to DOT. If they haven't, it will be submitted to DOT very soon. And so that's a huge milestone in getting that money going. Then we have to work with DOT on the next steps.
Okay, well, thanks for monitoring both of those minor things in the big picture, but important in my.
Important to us.
Director Sneddon has a question. Okay. Director Sneddon?
Oh, hey, Don. I was just wondering, you were talking about the FEMA funding. Is that for future FEMA funding, or would that have implications for like the 23 and 24 FEMA funding storms that were supposed to be FEMA funded?
Specifically, the funding that I was referring to is FEMA's disaster relief fund, and under the legislation, it would receive an additional allotment of I think $23 billion. So that is important for making sure that that account is available for responding to disasters, but also for providing reimbursements to folks like the County of Santa Barbara. And, you know, there's still a lot going on with the LA fires that hasn't been accounted for. There's a lot of demands for that. I think the way to look at the money that's in this current package is it keeps them solvent for the foreseeable future. It's not going to be enough for the entire year. I think they're going to have to do a supplemental appropriations bill at some point for FEMA, but this keeps them solvent and keeps them not having to slow down reimbursements to folks like the county.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments, Kathy? Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don.
The motion to wrap up this item, receive and file the report.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. We'll move to item 4, our state update from Hurst Brooks Espinoza.
Good morning. I guess we wanted to sort of recap the start of the 2026 legislative year for you all. As you know, the legislature returned to Sacramento on January 5th for the second year of our 2-year session. And January was very hectic because there are bills that have to move before the end of the month in order to continue to be considered. So those bills are hanging out in their house of origin. Some of them may be completely amended, some of them may be moderately amended, but need to move forward by January 31st. So we have passed that deadline, and now the legislature can sort of focus on the bill introduction deadline, which is later this month, as well as budget discussions. As you know, the governor presented his 2026-27 budget proposal. The budget is essentially a workload budget reflecting sort of status quo programs and services. There's no specific or considerable reductions. There are no proposals to expand programs or to change much as it that the state's already doing. The forecast, the budget forecasts about a $2.9 billion deficit. That is in contrast to the Legislative Analyst Office that projected an $18 billion deficit. So obviously there's some differences of opinion about the not only the impact of increased costs and federal actions, but also the longevity of this level of state general fund revenues. I think everybody acknowledges that there's a considerable risk associated with the amount of general fund revenues that the state is receiving, as they are primarily driven by a booming stock market and particularly in the technology sector. The so-called, AI investment bubble, I think makes people very nervous about the current year and the ongoing couple years afterwards. The administration does have a projected deficit of about $22 billion going forward. So there is a lot of risk associated with the governor's budget proposal. And regrettably, I think it is a little bit concerning that there aren't any substantive proposals, particularly to address some of the impacts of the federal government's actions, that the legislature will essentially have very little time after the revised budget is presented in May to consider to make changes to that kind of thing, given that the legislature has to adopt a balanced budget by June 15th or not get paid. We have prepared a pretty thorough summary of the governor's proposed budget that you should have received and is linked in the materials that we shared today. Again, it's a little bit of a boring budget because there aren't significant new proposals. I will go ahead and let Kelly talk a little bit about what's moving in terms of the legislature's interest in HR 1. It kind of is the, elephant in the room, if you will. But just wanted to note for you that we are operating in a Senate that is led by the new President Pro Tem, Senator Monique Limon, who you are all very familiar with. She did make a number of changes to committee assignments, and we've outlined those in the materials before you as well. But Kelly, maybe you can give an update on what the legislature's responses are with regards to HR 1.
So I think the legislature recognizes or is starting to recognize that there are a number of impacts to them related to the changes that are coming from HR 1. The administration put $1.1 billion in the January budget specifically related to HR 1 items. I think most of the money is related to the federal Medicaid assistance percentages changing for certain immigrant groups from 90% to 50%. And then the other place that they put money in that was a decent chunk was around the state's share of CalFresh administration increasing because the federal government is decreasing their share. The Assembly has already had an informational hearing. Assembly Health Committee had a discussion last week on the, January 27th. The chair of that committee, Assemblymember Mia Bonta from Oakland, spent the fall recess doing health convenings with members of the legislature, most of whom are on health committee, but they did sort of regional meetings. I believe they went to San Diego, Los Angeles, the Central Coast. She did one in her district and one in Santa Clara, and then I think there was one in the Sonoma area. Meeting with different health stakeholders and hearing about like what's on your mind, what are people worried about. And so I think she wanted to continue that conversation at a state level. They had 14 speakers at the hearing. They tried to do, I think, some level setting about all the work California has done to decrease its uninsured rate, to hear a little bit from consumers, from the state departments that are impacted, what does this all mean? And then they had a sort of provider, labor, consumer panel talking about on the ground impacts. They also invited the County Health Executives Association to do a briefing for them around as part of that hearing around what county indigent programs are and how they've changed over the last 15 years since the Affordable Care Act was implemented. So I feel like that was a good education moment because a lot of members of the legislature don't know what indigent programs were because they've, become less of a thing as more people became insured, and there were more options for folks. Um, Assembly Health Committee staff had indicated to me that they don't know that when they're gonna have more informational hearings. They really sort of wanted to kick off the year with that. I think the Senate is gonna have a series of hearings. My understanding is the full budget committee wants to do an HR1 educational hearing. The budget subcommittee focused on health and human services also is going to do a hearing. And then Senate Health is interested in doing a hearing as well. So I think we will see over the next month or so multiple venues to continue to educate the legislature. I'm just going to remind you that 70% of the legislature has been there 3 years or less. So a lot of the issues that are being discussed are not familiar to people. And so there's a lot of education that is going on, I think, to help kind of set the table for discussions. I thought there was a very good showing from individual counties at that during the public comment part of that hearing last week, talking about issues like we need resources to make sure people stay insured. So we need money for the eligibility workforce and Medi-Cal. We're gonna need support in restarting county indigent programs, and then the county with hospitals talking about their public hospital needs. So I think I think the messaging is starting to occur. And so it feels like we're at the start of a very long conversation that is gonna continue through the budget process. And frankly, given that we're gonna have a new governor next year, it's very likely that this kind of education is gonna have to continue into 2027.
With that,
Kelly?
we're happy to answer questions.
No questions in the room? Anybody online, Kathy? Nope. I think that wraps up the item. I have a motion to receive and file. So moved. Second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Passes. All right, we'll move to discussion and action items. Agenda item number 5, state legislation for streamlined housing development for county-owned property. So last year, the legislature passed AB 1021, which provided CEQA exemptions for property that was owned by a local education agency to develop workforce housing. That was supported by this committee and it passed. And in our update of the 2026 platform, the committee included the following language: extending allowances and streamlined procedures, such as those available to school districts, to county-owned property, enabling counties to implement innovative housing solutions, including local preference for public employees, to address local needs, including on parking lot surplus parcels and non-essential county facilities. So Supervisor Capps, I know you're interested in this item and wanted to discuss with the committee about how we might pursue legislation, move this forward.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask one clarifying question because I also was interested in, my understanding is that school districts also have an ease of being allowed to not only develop housing faster, but also allowing their employees to live upon it. I could be wrong, but that is also what I'm interested in. So some way to that allows more flexibility with the fair housing, federal fair housing laws. So I'm not sure it's solely AB 1021, which just passed, but it's a previous legislation, which I'm not fully aware of, that allows them to develop housing for employees, similar to what universities have, but which they've had for a long time.
Is it if the employer builds it,
Yeah.
then the employers have the ability to figure out who lives there. That would apply to the county too, wouldn't it?
No.
No, it doesn't.
There's
No.
some elements of state law that can play here, and also IRS, because a lot of these projects have low-income housing tax credits.
Yeah.
And as currently constituted, those credits don't allow designated
Right.
uh,
Whereas
recipients like we're talking about.
universities have employee housing and they've
Yeah.
been able to do that for a long time. So again, it's both things. I definitely am, I just want to broaden this. And so I didn't catch that until just preparing for this meeting, that it's not just the CEQA and streamlining. In fact, it's also who gets to live there and looking at what piece of state legislation allowed for that way back when, whenever that was.
Let me also, if I may, read something that's in the bill analysis of 1021 that speaks to your point.
Yeah.
It said the act also created a state policy supporting the use of low-income tax credits to fund housing for teachers and school district employees on land owned by the district, and permitted districts to restrict occupancy to teachers and other school district employees. So it's that particular state
Yeah.
action that I think is one of the
Uh-huh.
objectives you want to achieve and that we have to
Yeah.
pursue.
Great, okay, all right. And again, just to be clear, it doesn't mean that I want to make sure it only goes to county employees. I just want to potentially have the ability to do that if that's what the board or future boards want. So, but yeah, back to building this legislation. I appreciate all these ideas. I just want to see where we start from here, obviously talking to our own legislators.
These are your ideas so far.
Yeah.
So
Or our
you want to give voice to that just for that?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to, begin the work and see where we go. Talking with our lobbyists to see if they're there, this legislative session, beginning with our own assembly person and our own state senator. Building with these, building a coalition to get the momentum behind us.
I would add that, as Director Plowman knows, local preference for all the housing that we're building under a housing element
Yep.
is really critical. Because otherwise, in our area, it's a resort and a lot of it'll go for second homes and Airbnb and things like that. So I know that Assemblymember Hart, I gave him some suggestions about what's happening in some other states, Massachusetts in particular. And I know he's working on it, but I would encourage you all at HPE to, anything that gives us more authority for providing housing to our workforce that we're building, because otherwise it gets gobbled up by others and we can build all of this and it'll be for naught. And that's the great risk and great fear.
Yeah. And there's a lot of constraint with fair housing law about what a jurisdiction can do.
Right, but some of it is state. And change, they can
Yeah.
change that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, HB, I don't know if you have any comments now, but maybe the request from the committee is if you could look into this a little bit and suggest maybe
Local
what,
reference, yeah,
how we
that would be
could,
great.
capture all of these desires, and then we could kind of make a plan to move forward. Like, what do we need? What changes do we need? And then we can make a plan to work on those.
Yeah, is that just what's the protocol? Is this something that, we just go off and do? Do we do this as a committee? Do we ask you to do it? I'm not. We can just.
I have a suggestion if it works for you.
Sure.
We can work with HPE and try to develop something and bring it back to the committee as a game plan, if you will, that outlines their analysis of the state legislation and where it might be appropriate to insert the appropriate language.
Yeah, and I don't, I think I know how to work legislation. I love the fact that we have the heft of this committee. And so I don't want to just start doing things because I have an idea about how to do them, but rather work with the benefit of this brain power and the fact that we do have this as part of our platform, which I'm very grateful for.
And I would encourage you to work with P and D. I'm sure you would.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
they've got that as part of the housing element policies that they've got to develop. So understanding that within the broader state context and where we can shape legislation to broaden it would be great.
Claire, I just wanted to remind folks that we're happy to talk to Assemblymember Hurt's office about a proposal that could look like this. We do have a introduction deadline of February the 20th. So likely what will need to happen is working on language to bring back to the committee at the next meeting, but it would probably have to be inserted into a different vehicle or into a spot bill or something like that. So I just wanted everybody to kind of be clear about the timing and the deadlines as we move forward.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And I think this is also a long-term sort of effort. So if we can get language in this session, that's great. But I think if we need a standalone bill or something, even introducing it next year would still be worthwhile. It's a real-
And I know he was looking at this. I haven't kept up with where he might be, but
Yeah, I had just for the committee's information, we do have regular check-ins with Assemblymember Hart's office, and I did mention this to them, and they are very interested in working
Good.
on something like this.
Super.
Housing is something that they would love to partner with our county in. So,
Jean, is there anything that might be suitable, like as a pilot for, and I raise that because the board is going to be asked soon to consider a development team to develop a site here in the county that will be vacated soon and will be available for housing development for the very audience that the supervisors have discussed.
Yeah. Potentially, Chris, I don't know what you think. I imagine there are a number of counties who would like this kind of authority. So, I mean, it might be a pilot with many folks
Well,
joining if
I'm
possible.
thinking about it because of the high costs and those unique features in Santa Barbara
Yeah.
County, and that might make it easier for some of the other supporters that we might need.
Yeah, and I think thanks, Jane, for the question. I think in some ways the path might be a little bit easier on this from the perspective of, last year's CEQA exemptions for affordable housing are pretty broad to the extent that this property is located, within an existing urbanized area that has utilities and things of that nature. So I think having an example of where it could potentially be useful is definitely very powerful in legislation. I do think the key issue for us to figure out here would be to what extent can we have preference for employees? How does that work with the funding mechanisms that are common for affordable housing, and making sure folks in the housing advocacy community as well as the development community are comfortable with that. So a lot to unpack there, but I think to the extent that this property you're talking about meets the criteria for last year's CEQA exemptions, at least that's not an issue we'd likely have to engage in. So happy to take a look and dive into the details.
It is an infill site, so it very much meets, I think, the criteria that you described.
Is there a limit on the acreage
Great. Thank you.
Right. I think maybe just for administrative purposes, let's make that a motion to ask HPE and CSD and with input from planning to come back with suggestions about how legislation can support employees moving into county developed housing as well.
as well as the broader issue of employees who work in the county in any.
though? So for market rate housing, affordable housing.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Motion? Is that a motion?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And did we have any public comment? All right, we'll move to item 6, 2026 critical projects legislative funding. So this item is basically just to introduce the fact that we'll be updating the list of critical projects. So in your packet, you have the list that we used last year was pretty much carried over from the year before. This is a list of primarily capital projects that are shovel-ready in the county that we can submit for different funding opportunities. Most often, this is federal earmarks. Sometimes there's a state opportunity, other federal grants. Don mentioned the word of funding. And so if we have this list of projects that the committee has approved, we're able to act more quickly to submit them for funding. So this list will be updating. I will solicit input from the department directors and all of the supervisor offices, bring it back to the committee and to the board. So just want to let everyone know that that is going to occur.
What's the timeline of the board?
So we never know exactly when the federal earmarks opportunities will come up, but last year, and if Don's here can correct, I think like late March was the first we heard about it, and kind of into April, and the House and Senate had different deadlines. So we'd hope to bring this back in the March committee and then get approval by the board in a short period of time. But so we'll be working on updating the list over the next couple of weeks and then going through the additional approval processes.
Okay.
Don, is that right?
Yeah, I think you have to assume that deadlines will be late March, early April. We just don't know, but that's a good assumption.
Great.
Cool. We'll be working on that. If you have ideas for projects, let me know. We'll be in touch. We'll update the existing projects. We want to carry those forward and look at.
Are these a community project funding cycle? The congressional earmarks, right?
Yeah, that's the most common.
Yeah.
But yeah, it could be like other projects like.
Yeah.
So when Congressman Carbajal sends that email, is that separate from this, or is that this?
Are you referring to the email he sent about, or just when he?
Like in the past couple of years, his district director, Erica Reyes, will send out an email saying,
Yeah, no, it's this.
okay, all right, I want to make sure. Okay.
Yeah, and typically in the past, we haven't submitted all of the projects. We'll get advice from Don and choose what from this list seems like it will most likely be effective.
Okay.
And typically we choose like two maybe and submit those to different offices, kind of
So
strategize.
just while we have Don here, Lower Mission Creek at 50 million, is that?
And not that one, they would add that the amounts I think are for the total project. But we'll submit for an amount that would.
Okay.
Yeah, a partial.
Gotcha.
Like the earmarks typically a little under $1 million.
Good.
Anything to add, Don, that I missed?
Well, yeah, that's a great example, the Lower Mission Creek project. I think one of the things that Claire alluded to is that projects that have the board's approval can be pursued through other means than just congressional earmarks. Lower Mission Creek can be helped along through word language, for Water Resources Development Act language, for instance. We've been working with the Public Works agent staff and your delegation on that. And then there are limitations of what we can do in the community project funding or congressionally designated spending categories, but knowing it's on the approved list or a priority list allows us to kind of work to see what can be done, and that's worked well in the past. And there's a lot of limitations in terms of eligibility and project size, but knowing what the agencies and the board feels are priorities is so helpful to us in doing all that.
Would the Kachuma project also fit under WRDA?
There's some eligibility issues there in the past. Kachuma has been funded through the Bureau of Reclamation. These are, I believe you're
Army
speaking
Corps.
about the facilities there, which are operated by the county and serve the county's concessions. Those are owned by the federal government and specifically the Bureau of Reclamation. So you really can't fund those improvements through the Army Corps of Engineers. We haven't been able to figure out a way to do that.
Yeah, and the idea of having it on the list is that if something else comes along and it fits, we're ready to go.
It's not for lack of trying, in case we submit it.
Yes.
We had the word request and we did put it in there. Just in case, but yeah. And just to clarify, we'll send this list out to the departments as well to confirm this information and see if there's any
Yeah, ask
new.
if they want to
Okay.
continue with these projects. Sometimes more has occurred and we can update the description or solicit new projects, or sometimes some fall off because they've been funded. Right. Or just be prioritized. So yes, that email will go out today or tomorrow. Any other questions on that item? Any public comment item?
Just the Oasis Center, I imagine, I mean, now it's gonna be the library too, and that's more of a county function. The Oasis is more of a nonprofit, so it may be more desirable, maybe easier to pitch it at the federal level.
Yeah, I think that I remember having a conversation with Don about this last time, like when nonprofits are looked upon favorably and sometimes less so. But yeah, that one project has changed a bit since the description in
Yeah,
here, so it'll
right.
certainly be updated.
The library already has an earmark from years past. It's
They
like
have
$1 million.
$2
2
million.
million.
Yeah, and I was just checking on this morning, so that will be
Yeah.
used toward the purchase of the property,
Hmm.
and then Oasis will be fundraising for the build. And we did submit that again this past year, but it was not selected to the appropriations bills. But it can be submitted again. All right, I think that concludes our business for today. We'll reconvene March 2nd.
We need
Thanks.
to have a motion,
Motion to,
receive a file, the critical.
I think it just,
Yeah,
in
this is
case
gonna
of
be
things.
updated. We haven't adopted it yet.
yeah, I think we're good. Too much special direction. All right, so thank you. For the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone online, appreciate you.
Oh, when you're done.
Do you know